Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I thought I'd give you a brief overview on the Raspberry Pi 3 Model B. I understand it's been out for a while and there's a lot of reviews already online, but I figured, hey, it's my favorite maker platform, so why not give you a brief rundown on why it could be useful to you in your upcoming projects. So with that, let's begin. Let me throw some of the specs up here real quick for you to take a gander at while we go through the unboxing. So right away we're presented with this sort of minimalistic box. The Raspberry Pi logo presented here. We can see Element 14 is a manufacturer. On the back side, it lists some of the names of the Raspberry Pi in different languages and some of the features like the wireless LAN and Bluetooth 4.1. So if we crack the top here, we're presented with a bunch of user manuals and safety guides. For all our intents and purposes, we're not really concerned with this stuff, so we can just throw it to the side real quick. And then if we dig deeper into the box, we can see that we're presented with this nice looking paper bag, and this sort of holds the single board computer in question. So when we open this, we can see the Raspberry Pi in all of its grandeur. So moving from the right to the left, we can talk about all the components that make up this Pi and all the features and maybe some of the issues you may run into when working on your projects. So first of all, we can see 4 USB 2.0 slots. This is actually very useful, at least in my experience, because for a board this size, that's actually quite a lot of USB ports. Honestly, I haven't really run into performance issues with using USB 2.0. I haven't really had a use case where I needed that USB 3.0 speed. So this is like really more than enough. Moving down to the Ethernet jack right here. This Ethernet jack is rated at 100 megabits per second. Again, it would be nice to see an Ethernet jack that could run a little bit faster, probably a gigabit. But I understand, to meet that price point of $35, you gotta make cuts like somewhere along the lines. So yeah, I haven't really run into any performance bottlenecks there, but it's just something to keep in mind whenever you use the Raspberry Pi. If we go a little bit left to the Ethernet jack, we can see the audio out and video out jack. Honestly, in my experience, the audio quality is very subpar on the Raspberry Pi. It's very noisy and there's a lot of tinny sound feedback that you can get. So in all honesty, you're better off just buying a USB sound card. They're relatively cheap on eBay and they work out of the box. So moving on, we can see that there is a camera connection and a display connection piece. So this is where you'd hook up your Raspberry Pi camera, and this is where you hook up one of those small little displays. Usually it's like a TFT display, and yeah, those are pretty handy. It allows you to extend the capabilities of this board quite a bit. Then you have your HDMI output when you output to your monitor TV, and looking on the top of the board, we can see a plethora of GPIO input and outputs. This is really useful for your projects to plug in sensors and whatnot. The board utilizes a quad-core 1.2 gigahertz ARM CPU, which is pretty snappy, all things considered. It has 1 gigabyte of RAM, which is really not that much, but for most of my projects, I haven't really run into any serious issues performance-wise. And finally, we have the micro USB power slot right here. So I believe the Raspberry Pi is rated to run at 700 milliamps. Most of the time when you get a kit with a Raspberry Pi, you'll get a power adapter that's rated for 1 amp or so. But in my experience, when you start hooking up a lot of sensors or little components up to the GPIO pins and running Raspberry Pi camera, USB peripherals, it starts to create a lot of draw on the Pi, so you're probably better off buying a beefier power supply. This input, I believe, is rated for 2.5 amps, so I'd say your best bet is going for a power supply 2 amps or up. Actually, right here I have a power supply, and it's rated for 4 amps. So this is a pretty beefy power adapter. It has 2 micro USB outputs. This is probably a little bit overkill for your project, but I'm doing some image processing and overclocking the Pi, so it needs a lot of power available to it. And if we look at the overall size of the Pi, you know, it's pretty small, you know. Right here, we're measuring 3 inches by roughly 3 1/4. Is that right? Yeah. So that's pretty good. It's almost like credit card size, which is pretty impressive. Now let's talk about the operating systems that you would sort of run on the Pi. I think the main flagship operating system would be Raspbian, which is a Debian derivative. Honestly, it's your best bet. It comes with Python 2 installed, 2 and 3. If you're anything familiar with Linux, you should be able to, you know, get going right out the gate. There's also a number of other Linux distros, but in all honesty, I haven't really used them at length, so I can't really comment on them. There's also Windows IoT Core, which is a dumbed down version of Windows 10, sort of like tailored towards the Pi. But in my experience, I would say sort of just shy away from that. There's some one-off distros which are pretty cool that you should check out. If you're interested in creating a media center, you should check out Kodi, or if you wanted to create a game emulation machine, you could check out RetroPie. Those are pretty cool. Flipping the Pi over the back, we can see that there's this micro SD card slot, and this is where you would boot your operating system off of. So yeah, you can use any third-party micro SD card. So I have a 16 gigabyte card right here. In my experience, you can get away with 8 gigabytes, and you won't ever really need more than, I would say, 32, unless you're storing files or whatnot. But in that case, you would use an external hard drive. So 16 gigabytes is a nice middle ground, I would say, and it only costs roughly $10. So I would recommend that you get a reputable brand card, because I've had really cheap ones crap out on me for no reason. So that's just something to keep in mind. So yeah, that's just a high-level overview of the hardware and the components that make up the Pi. I'm not really going to go into detail about, you know, the operating system features and the performance metrics. So you know, in conclusion, the Model 3 is a quad-core, single-board computing platform that is great for your maker-style projects. I'll leave a link in the description with all the accessories and where you can pick up a Pi 3. So yeah, mash the like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching. Peace.